Welcome to Movie Magic. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today we are obviously reviewing The End of Oak Street, the new dinosaur movie that just came out this last weekend in theaters. And to head off the very start of this video, do I recommend going to see this movie? I do recommend going to see this movie and getting a taste of it for yourself. I think the reviews generally online, or at least on Letterboxd, are more mixed than I was personally expecting. I really liked this movie, but if you are going to go into it understanding what it is. So the first couple major sections of this video are basically going to go into this. The first real question is how well does the trailer actually sell what this movie is doing? This is an important question in this movie's case because I think it isn't actually representing what the movie you're going to get is going to be, largely as with regards to the tone. So if you've seen the trailer, you probably know what I'm talking about. There's one particular line in the trailer that basically gives you an idea of what this movie might be in terms of the writing, in terms of the dialogue, that is a bad impression, the sort of Marvel quippiness, those types of jokes. The daughter has a particular line in there that's what about all the people out there getting eaten, or something along those lines. And just the way that that line is delivered and the way that it is cut into the trailer makes it seem like that is very much the type of tone that this movie is going to go for, that it might be sort of like a horror comedy type of thing, or that it at least is going to lean into just that quippy, jokey style of dialogue that we've grown so used to over the last 2 decades of Marvel, and quite frankly, many of us have come to loathe, and which frankly does not fit in some of the movies that it is utilized in. However, if you watched the trailer and kind of expected that kind of an experience from this, that's not what you're getting. I think the trailer misunderstands the tone of the movie immensely, to the degree that that particular line that I just shouted out, I'm pretty sure is not even in the movie. The line is there, but it's delivered in a very different way, executed in a very different way, and the scene that it comes from is much... It's not grim, that's not necessarily what the movie is doing, but the scene is more dramatic. It is more emotional. It is executed with much more weight, not the type of Marvel quip type of quote-unquote levity that the trailer makes it out. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that the line is actually different. I think they just straight up used a different take of the line in the trailer. I'm 98% certain that that is the case. So whoever cut the trailer, no idea who did, if they're involved with the direction or with the main editing of the movie or anything. I have no idea how that process goes, but whoever cut the trailer either very heavily misunderstood what the movie was trying to be, or they made that decision intentionally to try to get in a wider audience to watch this movie in the theaters that, wouldn't necessarily go to watch a horror movie per se. Because that's going to take us into the secondary topic of this movie, and that is what actually is The End of Oak Street from a genre and tonal perspective. And so this carries on from the trailer, because obviously I just said that the trailer makes it seem like it's going to be a little bit lighter than it actually is, that it's going to be quippier, and that's not what this movie is doing at all. Not even really a little bit. The End of Oak Street is basically a horror movie. The obvious comparison that people are going to want to ask about is obviously Jurassic Park, for dinosaur related reasons, of course. And while there are some ways in which I think that asking that question isn't necessarily the most useful, say how quality is it compared to Jurassic Park, that's not a useful question to ask, but you can ask what is it doing in comparison to Jurassic Park, and that question I think is actually very useful, because The End of Oak Street and Jurassic Park are basically opposites of each other. If Jurassic Park is more of an adventure film, it has a couple of not spookier scenes even. It's got a couple of horror tinged scenes in there, scenes that are definitely way more tense, way more anxiety inducing, even scary, depending on who you're asking about. Scenes like the kitchen scene, for example, that's a pretty freaky sequence actually in Jurassic Park. But overall, that's not really a horror movie. It's not a scary movie. It's much more about the wonder, the the adventure. Basically, it's an adventure dinosaur movie where you're taking the dinosaurs out of the past and bringing them to the present. Those two things are completely shifted on their head in the end of Oak Street, where you're actually taking a present situation and putting it back into the past, which I think is implicitly obviously the case if you watch the trailers, but it becomes more obvious when you watch the movie, of course. But that's basically what you're doing there. And as a result, instead of the amazement and wonder that comes with, wow, we just brought dinosaurs to today, isn't that so cool? It's more like, how the heck did we just end up with all of the dinosaurs here? This is horrible. And as a result, it's a very horror scene. It's a very horror movie in that way. It pushes the PG-13 rating to its limit in a couple of regards, with the tension, with the tone, the thematic type of stuff, and in some scenes, even the violence is getting to a point where I wouldn't say like it's close to an R, but there are some sequences where it feels like they're pushing the limits of the PG-13 rating, because again, this is basically just a horror movie. It's not a horror movie in the sense that it's super violent or that it's super scary, but it utilizes jump scares. There's a ton of tension, and the first act in particular is utilizing that to some pretty great degrees. Actually, the end of the first act into the beginning of the second act is a lot of really tense moments that are basically just horror movie type of tension. It's handled exceptionally well. So if you're going to see the end of Oak Street, basically to end off the whole opening of what this review is talking about, go into it knowing that this is a lot scarier of an experience. It's a lot more tense. It's more of a horror movie than it is an adventure movie, and that the tone of it is not really represented very well by the trailer, all things considered. Like, the more wondrous and amusing side of the movie is exemplified in the trailer, where the more horrifying stuff is not quite so much the focus. I mean, it makes sense from a trailer perspective, but this movie is a lot more intentional than that, in my opinion. So what it comes right down to, for me at least, is I really liked this movie, but I want to start off with a couple of the notes that might turn some other people off, or slash some of the things that didn't fully work for me to some degree or another. And most everything about this movie did work for me, but I've been having to think a lot about like what I think is turning people off to this movie, because I think last I checked anyway, the average rating for The End of Oak Street on Letterboxd is like 3.2 or something, which is way lower than it should be, in my opinion. Like, I don't understand how the rating is that low. The bulk of ratings are between 3 and 4 stars, which makes sense, but there's a lot more 2 and 2.5 star ratings than there are 4 and 4.5, or sorry, 4.5 and 5 star ratings. And I wonder if the reason for that is because of the audience that went to see it in theaters. Maybe they were expecting something a little bit more like what the trailer was giving them. Maybe they were expecting something perhaps a little more comparable to Jurassic Park in the tone than what they were getting. Maybe there were people who went to see the movie not expecting it to basically just be straight up horror, and it's basically just straight up horror. I'm wondering how many of the below 3-star reviews are people in one of those three camps, basically, because if I were to take a guess, it's probably a large amount. Because while there are some problems with the movie, most of them pretty minor in my opinion, I don't think they're major enough for people to dislike the movie that much, right? But that's just my opinion. So what are some of these relatively minor problems as far as I experienced them? Well, there are a few conveniences. There are certainly some things that you could point to and say that that's relatively contrived for the purposes of the plot. There are some other sequences that I mean, quite frankly, if we're going to talk about kids, for example, another Jurassic Park example, instead of the kids being annoying like they are in Jurassic Park, they're pretty stupid in The End of Oak Street, making decisions that, again, are somewhat contrived for the purposes of pushing the plot forward rather than something that any of these people sensibly would have actually done. But some of these problems and some of the related issues are more so, I think, related to the fact that the movie is both needing to be a full movie rather than like a short film, and also the fact that it is also shorter than your average film. This movie is only about 100 minutes long, and I'll tell you, it does not need to be longer than that. I'm glad that it is that short. It does it a lot of favors, but also maybe some of those plot contrivances come from the fact that it is needing to be a full movie, and so it kind of makes a couple of characters do a couple of things because plot needs it to happen. There's also one particular subplot that exists within the movie, mostly in the first act, but has some stuff happen in the second act that like doesn't really need to be there. The End of Oak Street isn't set in modern day. I think it's set either in the late 80s or early 90s, if I were to take a guess, just based off of some of the technology that's involved in here. You can tell this was written specifically to take place in a not modern era thing, so that you're not dealing with cell phones or anything like that. You're very much dealing with phone lines. Radio is a thing that's here. A lot of the vehicles are older models of vehicles than, you know, 2000s or anything like that. So very much this is set a little bit earlier, and as a result, you know, kind of 80s nostalgia stuff. You understand like any Stephen King book, for example, during those era or that era, I suppose, his early writing era. Like there's always that stereotypical bully, and there is one of those types of characters and a character dynamic that comes from that within this movie that is kind of forced in there. It doesn't really need to be in there. So there's some little things like this that might not necessarily fit entirely within the film for some people. I can understand some of those criticisms. I think that the movie relies a little bit more on jump scares than it needs to. A few of them are very good, quite effective, but there are a couple of them that are pretty cheap and just like, okay, that one didn't really need to exist. Why are we doing that? So the jump scare quality is across the board between really good and also like, why does that even exist? And then there's also some other like little things that I don't want to like spoil outright. Just mostly it's like minor nitpicky type of things, most of which don't bother me very much personally. Like many of these complaints are like, I didn't really complain about that. There were just things that some people who are in same Discord servers as I am in said about the movie, or things that I am anticipating or guessing based off of, you know, average reviews or something like that. But I don't hold many of these complaints myself, but those are like really the major weaknesses of The End of Oak Street. As far as its strengths, I think that the main reasons why this movie works so well for me are the tension, particularly kind of a slow build into the inciting incident, I guess you could say, the way that it handles that, and the family drama is the main thing. I suppose this is probably something I should have said earlier in the review if anybody had clicked off, you know, after basically my recommendation points was if you're going to go into The End of Oak Street, understand some of those things that I said earlier, but also The End of Oak Street is just as much a family drama as it is a dinosaur movie. And so if you don't want a family drama, I could see those people not really liking this either, because that is a huge focus of what the movie is doing. You have your four main characters who are all in a family, and that inherent relationship and some of the struggles that are coming from that is really the heart of what the movie is doing. The family drama is the drama. It is the conflict of the film, and that just happens to be really, 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 you know, thrown into some pretty rough situations because of the whole dinosaur stuff. And that dinosaur set becomes a very horrific setting in which to explore the family drama, in which, you know, inherently affects that drama, both in good ways and in bad ways. That is all depicted really well. I fear that I'm doing a very poor job explaining any of this, but the family drama is really probably the thing I personally enjoyed the most about The End of Oak Street. And then the dinosaur stuff intercutting a lot of that and also affecting a lot of that was really well done. Like there's one particular sequence, I'm not even going to allude to it in any way that is spoilery because it would be a massive spoiler to say so. But a particular thing happens, and that event really affects the final act of the movie, basically. And that is really well done. some shocking moments, some really surprising moments, a lot of really heartfelt moments. The movie is just balancing a lot of things in a really great way. And like I said, because the movie is only 100 minutes long, it's not wasting much of anything. There are some things that maybe don't feel entirely necessary, but you don't feel like you wasted your time with it because it's not trying to be 220 minutes like Masters of the Universe is. I have a review of that coming next week. I hated that movie. But The End of Oak Street was a really, really great time. And I think that if you're looking for just an enjoyable and quite frankly scary dinosaur movie. If you're upset with all of the very action forward dinosaur movies that are, kind of quippy, like the Jurassic World ones, for example, movies that don't treat dinosaurs as terrifying, The End of Oak Street does that, so it's a tonal shift, and it makes sense. The director's a horror director. Like he made It Follows, I believe is the title of the movie, and like that's also a pretty tension-inducing horror film. But so I'm not even really sure what else to say or how else to say it with regards to this film. I really enjoyed it personally. I think it's really, really solid. It's a good time. It's fun in the way that horror movies can definitely be fun and enjoyable for being horror movies, right? Like that's not so insane of a concept. But if you go into it understanding a little bit more of what it is and what it is actually doing, you're more likely to enjoy it even more. I was pleasantly surprised by those aspects, and that's what made me enjoy it. And quite frankly, it's executed really well. I think that the writing is really well done. The family drama is well done, so the writing of it had to have been good for that to be good, and also the performances had to be good, and they are. I think the kids do very well the parts that they play. Anne Hathaway, of course, does very well. Ewan McGregor also does very good. I'm just big fan of the focus of this movie and it not trying to force itself to be more than what it is, even if there are maybe a subplot like the bully one that I mentioned that's like not entirely necessary. But all of that is really good. The only final point that I guess I'll talk about here is basically the ending. I'm not going to spoil anything, of course, but I think the ending is really good. I was kind of, based off of the trailer, based off of the conceit, based off of the first act moving into the second, basically, I was wondering for most of this movie's runtime, and also kind of vaguely in the back of my head for all the weeks leading up to the movie's release, like, how is this going to end? Like, with this concept, what are they going to do to end this that isn't just abysmally, like, grim and depressing, right? Because even with this being a horror movie, I didn't think that they were going to do that, not least because the trailer makes it seem like a much lighter movie than it actually is, but also because I don't think that ending this particular movie in a dismal way would work. Like, what kind of satisfying type of close are you going to find with a movie if that's the direction you're going? So they instead go for a different direction to try to make a good ending out of it, and although I didn't really see the full ending coming, because you kind of know what they're trying to do by halfway through the movie, of course. But we'll just say that I didn't really see the ending itself coming personally. But even if you do, I do think that it is handled also well enough to justify it. I think that the ending is satisfying for the film. You get to have the entire experience, and then you get to have it wrap up and close in a way that is fitting and that doesn't break itself. And if you have seen the movie, if you know the ending, if you know what it's trying to do with all of that, the whole breaking itself point will make a lot of sense to you. And if not, you're probably wondering what the heck I'm rambling on about. But needless to say, I really liked the movie. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time with it. And quite frankly, I hope that more people see it, and I hope that more people like it, because I think that average rating is way lower than it should be. Not just because I gave it a high rating, but because I think that probably no small amount of those low ratings are from people who expected this to be something that it is not, and didn't expect it to be what it is. Either one of those points, or both together. However the cookie falls or crumbles or whatever the idiom is here. In either case, I think I'm probably done rambling here. It is very warm in my office. I just recorded several hours of Let's Play today. So it's very hot in here. My brain is fried. I think I said all the major points that I needed to. I hope I didn't forget anything, but we'll see. This video's long enough as it is. Thank you guys for watching if you did. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.